Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Business of Success, where we are really always focused on building better from the inside out. There are companies that I have worked at that are small companies, very, very small. I mean, sometimes the company didn't even exist yet. But there are companies that I have worked at that are very, very different than that have been around for a long time and that have sort of built business practices, tried and true, and also continuing to innovate. So one of those companies is Procter and Gamble. And one of the first people I met, I think, Naazli, you were the first person I spoke to from P&G, is the person that we have on today. So Naazli Sado. I'm going to do a short intro, but Naazli, I'd love for you to introduce yourself. So Naazli is currently Vice President New Business at Procter and Gamble. Her work encompasses work as Chief Co-Operating Officer, Chief HR, IT, and Communications Officer for the business unit responsible for new business development that is called P&G Ventures. This is a really unique business unit, so I'm really excited to dig into you about this. But welcome, welcome. And if you don't mind, just give everyone a little bit of a snip about you, who you are, where you're from, and what we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely. And I have to say, Parul, I still remember recruiting you. I still remember taking you out to dinner, all of that fun stuff. It's been a while, but it feels like no time at all. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here and chat a little bit. For my undergrad, graduated and did finance and a little bit of this and that, trying to figure out who I wanted to be when I grew up, and ended up at Purdue to get my MBA. And from there, I joined P&G for HR. I've done lots of different types of work, both in the US and I was in Asia Pacific for about 4 years. I would say that experience was definitely very formative. Before this role, I was in our North America employee relations role, helping the organization through COVID. That was an interesting experience. And then I would say this one, it's been a fun adventure. Starting something new is always fun, right? I would have to say, although my biggest adventure has been being mom of a preteen and a teen. That one, I'm not sure I'm being quite as successful as some of the other things in my life, but we're trying.
I
Oh,
can imagine that being one of the biggest growth opportunities, just being a mom myself, right? Where you're in constantly in uncharted territory and there's not necessarily a playbook for it, but it is the most rewarding, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I've told my kid that, right? Like my daughter, who's the eldest, right? I've told her, listen, I've not done this before. It's not like you came with a guidebook, right? So I'm going to mess you up. I'm going to just try really, really hard not to mess you up in ways that matter. Right.
I love that. That's good, honest conversation. I need to have that with my kids when they understand what that exactly means. Okay, well, let's talk about why we're here. So, long ago, I was an intern at Procter and Gamble. I learned so much for you as a senior, leader in the organization, somebody that I really saw taking on things, taking on responsibility. And if I even think about like strong women over my career, I think I have always gravitated towards these women that were just like taking on leadership. Like at that time, I think you were leading the intern program, right? Something as an opportunity that presents itself and the people that go out and seek it. So now I see your trajectory. You've obviously grown immensely. You're wearing several hats in your current role. Um, and I'm not surprised, that doesn't surprise me in the least. But for those that haven't worked with you, I would love to hear you share a little bit about your journey of growth. I know you shared a little bit about the career trajectory you took, but how did you get to this new business venture for a company like Procter and Gamble that's been around for several, 100+ years, right? So tell us a little bit of that journey and how you stepping into those opportunities maybe shaped your
One thing I would say is, thank you for those kind words, by the way. I appreciate it. I'd love to say there was this plan and I went after this and that because of XYZ. It's really not that planned out. When you talk about leading the intern program, I had a full-time job and I just saw a need, something I was passionate about. I've been very, uh, a privilege to work at a company that where when I've found areas of passion, I've found a way to channel them, not in almost the most obvious ways. And so one of the reasons I've stuck around with P&G so long, right? But I also think if I have to really think about like where my growth has come from, sometimes it has come from my core roles. And a lot of times those were really great stepping stones. But I've learned as much from those passion projects that I've gone after, or roles that I just felt like there was a need, and I said, hey, is somebody willing to let me go work on this or try something? And learn that way. I also say, I am a big learner. Like I just strive to seek out different experiences. And what that meant was later on in my career, I'd done so many divergent things that when something new comes up or there's a great opportunity, it helps, right? It helps to have relatable experiences. It helps to have said, hey, I haven't done exactly something like this, but here's my experiences that correlates. I said that would be a few things I would say. Like I said, there's not an intentional plan. I'm not one of those like 5, 10 year plan out things, right? Just follow passions, learning. That's what I
I
would say.
love that. Well, and I think I definitely see you looking at those opportunities, right, throughout your career. Like, hey, there's an opportunity to maybe have a hand in something or to influence something. And that seems to be a trend that you are somebody that gets excited about those opportunities, right? If I may say so. So you've obviously taken on many different types of roles, formal roles. Maybe something that is more structured, though, is how you think about employee skill building. So obviously, your own plan and your path may have been a bit organic, but when it comes to guiding others or training others or teaching others, what are some of the things that you have learned that have shaped how you maybe approach employee skill and development?
So one thing I would say, I don't know if I could, I mean, it is an approach, but I think that sometimes we get narrow very quickly, right? We pick up lane and a path, and this part maybe was intentional. What I wanted to do was I wanted to make sure I understood the broader context within which my work was sitting. And so being able to step back and look at the bigger picture, one of the things that I'm able to do the role that I am, even though I historically grew up what we would call in HR, is because I wanted to step back and understand how the business was run and participate in the business. And they give me sort of wide legs to stand on, so to speak, right? And I think that's really important. We've built at uh, PG Ventures, we built a program called Think Like a GM. We want everybody to be able to think like a GM, even though they have specialist skills, right? Like, and those specialized skills are really important because it helps you find your voice, right? If you understand how to speak the language of other business partners on the table, it helps you find your own voice. Secondly, it helps you make your ideas stronger, right? So even if you're participating as a specialist, you can say, here's the value creation opportunity for the business. And you really are able to bring an idea forward that's more developed versus something, I faced this, I would say, when I was earlier in my career. The idea was right, but, somebody else might cap- capture it in a different way. And it was because they were able to articulate the value to the business in a much more holistic way than I was able to do. So think like a GM is my effort to sort of say, give access to all our employees to say, hey, you too can think like a GM and it'll make whatever role, and regardless of level, we have it open to every level in the organization. And we have fairly strong participation and really good feedback from people saying, hey, that really helped me become a better business leader versus uh, whatever their title is, right? So,
Yeah, and I love this framework because I mean, truly in tech, we have been hearing this a lot of think like your leadership, right? And so thinking of obviously other industries, can you just explain to everyone just listening what's a GM role at P&G? What does that title mean?
who has P&L responsibilities? That's all multifunctions reporting into them, right? And they lead a major part of the business at a very high level. That's what I would call a GM.
The value of that and understanding that it's available for all levels is, wonderful way to say to people, hey, we're investing in your growth. I mean, whether or not you have an idea to present, that's a useful probably course to go through, right? Like whether you have that big idea or not, you're going to learn the language of the board, you're going to learn the language of the business, and you're going to be able to communicate your ideas, your future ideas better. I will also say I think training falls into the category of being a great retention tool. And P&G as a company is known for having or caring about retention, right? And I think and I say this not lightly because I think many companies, newer companies often overlook the value of retention and the honestly the costs of retention, right? Um, what I guess I'm kind of curious for you and your teams. When you're finding pathways for different employees, what is that how does that structure look? To say, hey, somebody maybe has a leadership trajectory, right? We want them to stay on in the organization, or maybe somebody doesn't want to be in leadership, right? So give us a couple of maybe examples from your experience of how you can approach retention when it comes to different employee needs or scenarios.
I'm gonna say two things. Like one, we as humans have some common needs, right? So
Yeah.
while there are differences in how you might manage somebody with different interests or passions or goals, right? There are some, have to have the foundation rights, right? And one of those is meaningful work, right? If you have anybody that's not working on something that's meaningful to them, that doesn't connect with the purpose, I think it's really hard for them to be at their best. Now, what that looks like can vary considerably based on their role, right? I would say the other thing for me is relationship with manager. We have a saying, I mean, it's a very common saying that people don't leave roles, they leave managers, right? And so,
Yes.
to invest in people, you have to invest in the managers of those people to make sure they have the skills, right? Now, in any population, there's good and bad managers, right? But I would say there's fewer people that have the intention of going to be a bad manager, right? It is a skill and it needs investment, very similar to other skills. And then there's lots of other things from a employee value equation. We call it EVE, right? That can go into what I would call a third bucket. But I do think, and you're kind of hinting at that, career and development becomes a big part of that, right? And how that gets managed is a partnership. It's a partnership between, at least done right. I view it as a partnership between what the individual wants and needs, as well as what the business wants and needs, and then there are specific paths there, and for somebody who wants to have those larger leadership roles, or wants to step into those, it's really important that they not just have the option to step into those divergent experiences, or so that they can start to think like a broader business leader, but that they are proactively developed into different types of roles, and they get exposure to different sides of business. For those that maybe have a specialist career path in mind, right? Like what is the right dipping so that they get the broader perspective, but then they are able to develop those deep skills. And then obviously there's all sorts of levels in the organization of how far somebody may want to go, and how deeply they want to commit to a certain space versus, more and more people are defining careers development, not just horizontally but vertically as well across spaces.
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. And I like that you referred especially to learning management as a skill that you have to learn, right? And I think that is important because I work with a lot of younger companies, right? Younger in tenure or even earlier in stages, size. And many times that's overlooked. It's a badge of honor to get promoted to be a manager, to manage somebody, but to actually do it and having not done it before, it's kind of like you're just guessing at that point. And I do remember actually from when I worked with business leaders, every leader that was about to be a manager going through a very rigorous manager training, investing in your leaders. Even the very earliest stages of leadership can be something that can help to drive other people's trajectories too.
Yourself, right? Like if that's not available in the ecosystem, I mean, especially now, learning has gotten so democratized, right? So you can invest in yourself
That's a
and
great point, yeah. But, I mean, I think we often forget that, right? There is so much training available. There's wonderful books. I mean, there's just so many things that you can lean into now, even if your business doesn't offer it. And actually, that's interesting that you mentioned that because I think the free training or the things that you can get quickly off the shelf or even on like YouTube are things that maybe aren't looked at as often but should be sometimes, just to get people ready for the next thing. We have AI tools in the forefront that are just disrupting many businesses. We have customer behavior changing, expectations changing, and we also are seeing shifts in employee populations. And unfortunately, some shifts in, we're hearing from sources like Catalyst of 455 women leaving the workplace, right? I'm curious when you think about building leadership at P&G, future ready leaders, right? There are going to be pivots, there are going to be twists, there are going to be turns. What are some tactics or techniques that you share with folks on how they can best stay the course, right? And still feel relevant, right? And I think even just in the world of AI, people feel sometimes nervous, right? Are there things that you share with leaders to help them continue to kind of be able to tackle the demands of the future?
This is going to sound like a little bit of a strange answer, right? My honest answer to that often is it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? Um, People often start thinking about, career and goals and development very much in like, did I get that one thing, or do I, and sometimes that short term focus, uh win the you can win the battle but lose the war, right? And so I do think getting a little bit bigger time horizon and then building learning into it, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And you shared something interesting of it's a marathon, not a sprint. I do feel like sometimes in 2026, everybody's like in a big rush to adopt every tool and everything at the same time, right? But that adoption is going to suffer when you're trying to do too much, probably, or when you are trying to sprint, right? You can only do so much, truly. So I do think that's a great piece of advice, even in today's world where you maybe feel just naturally could feel like you're behind, right? But your pace is maybe different also than anyone else's pace, right? Your marathon pace is maybe different than someone else's pace, and that's okay, and that's something that you're gonna be able to do over your.
I've certainly made choices in my career where I've had, I wouldn't say everybody would have agreed with those choices, but they were my choices and I own those choices, right? And so, absolutely. I think this is where I think finding your village helps, right? Like having other voices, because we are we all I know I do executive coaching for, as part of my job. And I'm a certified coach, all of those things. If you had to talk to me about myself, I lose perspective. Of course I do. You can coach yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really, really important to have your village, or places of trust where you can go to seek advice and seek balance and seek other perspective. And it's really important that they be divergent, exactly for the reason that you said, right? If you have someone that's just like you, right, which is often where we find in our village, right, it's people just like us, you don't get the benefit or the richness of how the ecosystem
Yeah.
might think about things, or a differentiated approach that's equally as good and maybe even better because that's more available right now than something that's not. So I would say villages are important.
Yes, absolutely. I went to a women's event recently and they said something very similar. They said, build your board, but your personal board, right? Not your, it doesn't have to be professional, but like to have people that you can talk to and really understand different perspectives. And I thought that was such a good piece of advice. That was that was my to do actually take home from the event. So similar kind of concept there. Well, let's shift a little bit. Now you're working at a very established company, but you actually have kind of ventured into this area that is new for P&G, newer, right? P&G Ventures, looking into new business opportunities and growth. Um, how was that experience? How was that experience of building something brand new, helping to build something brand new for such an established company?
Well, first, I think, you have to know what appeals to you, right? Like one of the things, I do love white space. I love going in and either taming chaos, right? Because, or setting direction when you don't know where the direction is. So for me, it was always going to be a place that I got pulled to. But and I have, even within whatever spaces I've had, I've looked for those opportunities. And if I can find it again in my main role, I found it other places. It really is hard. And we do talk about the best of both worlds, right? Like, because you want to operate, you're embedded in this amazing company, and it's great culture, and you want to sort of keep what's important, and but make sure you don't take what's not, what can't be applied to a new startup. And then you don't exactly want to be a startup, because the best place for a startup to be is outside. And there's a reason why these businesses, we decide to work on them within P&G, right? So we call it best of both worlds. And you have to be selective, and you have to be ready to make lots of mistakes, right? There is, you have to find joy in failure. It's hard.
I love that. And in that spirit, I think what I would love to know is if you could put yourself into the shoes of somebody, let's say, building and growing programs for employees for the first time or in a newer way, right? Um, maybe any advice for them, right? Anywhere they should start that you think, if you could put yourself in their shoes, where would you begin?
I think it's really important that people take the time to assess where they are and know that you can't work on. One of the things that I see is a lot of enthusiasm, which leads to we're going to conquer the world, boil the ocean, right? Um, but it's important to say, hey, when we started PG Ventures, for example, we had to say, what are the things that are really important, right? What are the no miss things? Yes, there's some base things, right? You have to pay people, right? Like things like that. But from a culture point of view, right? Like one of the things we said is we're an innovation organization. So we put a disproportionate focus on making sure that if I have a differing opinion, right, I'm able to bring that forward. I'm able to bring my full self and create a culture. We call it inclusive innovation, right? To drive innovation, you have to have that culture. And so we said, where are we? We set a baseline and we set a goal for where we want it to be, and it's great. We're you now scoring in the 90s on a for the last few years, and it's great, and we want to keep it there. And by the way, keeping it there means work, right? Like when you're in at those kinds of levels, it's like a great athlete. Like you just can't get there and then say, okay, I'm here now, right? Like you got to keep working at it. So I would say start with understanding of where you are and then the places that you want to invest in. So I would say the other thing I often challenge leadership teams for is how much time are you spending thinking about the organization? Because listen, leadership teams don't get the results, teams get the results.
And then, so, I mean, that's just a great way to start. No, first think about where you are and where you want to go. And then, maybe make time to focus on the organization, right? Every leader is going to be busy. And without, this is probably somebody else's saying. If you don't make time for it, it's likely not going to happen. If you don't put something on your calendar, you're likely not going to do it. Right. So, we're just going to borrow all the sayings today. But I think those are really important points because it can be as simple as making the time for it and even carving out, small portions of your leadership team meeting or whatever it is to talk about your organization. Those can be the building blocks of where you're going to actually evolve to. Um, okay, so I'm going to ask you kind of some more, I think, lighter, fun questions. But any tools or resources that you personally have loved that you would recommend to anyone?
I am loving exploring AI, right? I'm a novice at it. I would not claim any kind of expertise, but it is really fun to learn about topics and by being able to curate and have conversations. What questions do you have on this topic? Like, when I'm trying to solve a problem, the way the AI tool asks me questions and what questions helps me deepen my thinking, right? Then I have to answer those. And so learning how to prompt, right? AI, and I watch other different people do it and I pick up different things in terms of how to do it. So that's one. But for people who are like, okay, yeah, everybody talks about AI and don't give me an AI answer and I want something else. And since we've talked a lot about people and people development and investing in people, one concept that was brought forward in a book is multipliers.
Mm.
It's a book that I love. I usually have a few copies on my desk. So every time somebody comes to me with a topic that's relevant or for coaching, I usually grab it and share it with them. But it's something that really, really spoke to me about how do you take someone and get 120% out of them, and what are accidental ways, even if you're a great manager, what are accidental ways that you might be maybe minimizing people, right?
Yeah.
Is this your best work? And rather than providing the input, having them just do it a few times and get it right for themselves, the learning opportunity that presents, right? You can't do that all the time, but if you have an opportunity, there's lots of other accidental diminisher topics in there that made me really, really think about, it's not just important about wanting to invest, but making sure there's no behaviors that you think you're actually helping, protecting people too much, or those kinds of behaviors that are maybe preventing their long-term growth, right? it made me think about like some of the teachers, in college and other places that I've learned the most from are the ones that I've maybe liked the least, right? They were tough managers or tough teachers, and but you learn, you grow, right?
And you constructively that make you better, and that inspire you, maybe not just because they're always propping you up, right? Maybe they're telling you the truth. And I think that's really, yeah, great. We are ready to wrap up. And I just want to say, I've obviously watched your career since since I met you, right? But I really have to say it's really inspiring to see you just continue to seek out new and exciting challenges. And hopefully that in itself is inspirational to future leaders who are looking to grow themselves, right? And hopefully we have shared some nuggets. You have shared some lovely nuggets of that can help somebody grow their team or their organization as well.
I mean, right back at you. I mean, like, you talk about following your passion, right? Like, you have certainly sought it out and created it for yourself. So I would say right back at you. I mean, I know you're out there inspiring so many people. So I'm so glad you decided to do this, um, you know, podcast and are bringing leaders forward and sharing not just the leaders, but some of yourself and with others. I'm sure
Well,
it
thank
inspires.
you. That's so nice to hear. And yeah, I mean, I feel like it's been an unconventional path that I had not thought of, right? Similar to what you said at the beginning. I did not make any plans to do these things, but life takes you where it takes you, and it is a wonderful journey of growth. So if anything, we've learned that, lean into what drives you and what challenges you in a way. Well, thank you again, Nazi. It's been such a nice conversation, and just getting reconnected also has been really wonderful. So
Well, in
thanks for the
closing, the funny story is we got reconnected by
I know.
meeting each other in Mexico, running
Randomly
across the
bumping into
state.
each other. I was actually just thinking about that earlier today of like, I hadn't seen you for quite some time and then just bumping into each other during spring break. So, the value of networks, right?
The
If
world
you're
is
nice to
small.
people and you bump into them in Mexico, they might be your next podcast
There you
guest.
go.
You never know. Well, no, I know. I'm glad for that bump in. I'm just excited for all the things that you're doing. And thank you again. It's such an interesting time that we live in. So it's great to have perspective from somebody that's done a lot of different things and is continuing to evolve. So same. Thanks everyone, and I hope you will join us for the next episode of the Business of Success. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to the Business of Success. If today's conversation sparked a new way of thinking about growth, value, talent, leadership, don't forget to follow along and share this episode with someone who is building something meaningful. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Customer X Success, which is helping organizations design customer value, build better and higher impact teams, and turn success into a growth strategy. You can learn more about Customer X Success at www.customerxsuccess.com. I'm Parul Bandari, and this is the Business of Success, where success is built, not just chased. Until next time, see you soon.